When the rescue team found the camp 3 days later, they couldn't understand what they were seeing. The tent was shredded from the inside. The supplies were scattered across the snow, untouched, and there were tracks leading away into the forest. Tracks that started human, but became something else. Let me take you back to the beginning. It was January 2018, and 3 experienced outdoorsmen decided to spend a week winter camping in Algonquin Provincial Park in Ontario, Canada. Marcus Chen, 34, had been camping in these woods for over a decade. His brother David, 31, was an experienced hunter and tracker. Their friend Thomas Wright, 36, was a wilderness survival instructor. These weren't amateurs. They knew the forest. They knew the dangers. They knew how to survive. The plan was simple. 7 days in the backcountry, 20 miles from the nearest road, completely off the grid. They had enough supplies, proper gear for the brutal Canadian winter, and satellite phones for emergencies. They told the park rangers exactly where they'd be camping and when they'd return. Everything was done by the book. The first 2 days went perfectly. The temperature was brutal, dropping to -25°C at night, but they were prepared. They set up camp near a frozen lake, surrounded by dense pine forest. During the day, they explored the area, checking their trap lines, and enjoying the absolute silence that only exists in winter wilderness. At night, they sat around their fire, talking and watching the stars through breaks in the clouds. It was on the 3rd night that Marcus first heard it, a sound in the distance. Not quite human, not quite animal. A long, drawn-out wail that seemed to echo through the trees. It started low and rose higher, like someone screaming in agony. When it stopped, the forest fell into a silence so complete that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. He mentioned it to his brother and Thomas. They'd heard it too. David suggested it might be wolves, though he admitted it didn't sound quite right. Thomas, with 15 years of wilderness experience, said he'd never heard anything like it. They tried to shake it off. Strange sounds happen in the forest. Animals make noises that can sound almost human sometimes. But that night, none of them slept well. The temperature had dropped even further, and despite the fire, the cold seemed to seep into their bones. And twice more during the night, they heard that sound, that terrible wailing, each time closer than before. Close your eyes now, take a deep breath, and let me tell you what happened in those woods during the days that followed. On the morning of day 4, they found the tracks, massive footprints in the snow, circling their camp in a wide arc. The prints were roughly human-shaped, but far too large, easily twice the size of Marcus's boot, which was size 12. And there was something wrong with the stride. The distance between prints was impossibly long, as if whatever made them had legs far longer than any human. The tracks came from deep in the forest, circled the camp several times, and then disappeared back into the trees heading north. David, the tracker, examined them carefully. His face went pale. He told the others these weren't bear tracks. Bears were hibernating this time of year anyway. They weren't moose or elk. The shape was too humanoid, and they were fresh, made sometime during the night, while they slept just meters away. Thomas suggested they pack up and head back early. But Marcus, ever the rationalist, argued against it. It was probably just some prankster from another camp, he said. Someone trying to scare them with fake tracks. David didn't agree, but they decided to stay one more night. That night, they kept the fire burning high. They took turns keeping watch. Marcus took the first shift from 8 p.m. to midnight. The forest was utterly still. No wind, no animal sounds, just the crackling of the fire and his own breathing. At 11:30, he heard branches snapping in the darkness beyond the firelight. Something large was moving out there, circling the camp. He could hear it, but couldn't see it. He woke the others. The 3 of them sat in tense silence, watching the darkness. The sounds continued for over an hour. Footsteps in the snow, the crack of breaking branches. And then, at 1:15 in the morning, they heard it clearly. A voice, deep and distorted, but unmistakably calling Marcus's name. Mayor Arcasus. It came from the north, from the direction the tracks had led. It sounded like it was trying to mimic human speech, but couldn't quite get it right. The syllables were stretched and wrong. Thomas grabbed the satellite phone and tried to call for help. No signal. That wasn't right. They'd had a signal when they arrived. Marcus tried his phone. Same thing. No signal on either device. David loaded his hunting rifle. They decided they were leaving at first light, emergency or not. But they didn't make it to first light. At 3 a.m., something hit their tent. Not from outside, from inside. One of their supply bags suddenly flew across the tent, as if thrown by invisible hands. Then another. The tent wall bulged inward as if something was pressing against it from outside. But when they looked, nothing was there. The temperature inside the tent plummeted. Their breath became visible, even though they'd been warm moments before. Frost began forming on the inside of the tent fabric, and then they heard it right outside. Breathing. Heavy, ragged breathing that sounded like it was coming from something massive. The tent wall pressed in further, stretching toward them. Thomas screamed. They grabbed what they could and ran. They abandoned the tent, the fire, most of their supplies. They ran into the forest, heading south toward where they thought the nearest trail would be. They ran for hours in the darkness, using their headlamps to light the way. Behind them, they could hear it following, crashing through the forest, sometimes close, sometimes distant, and periodically, that voice, calling their names, one by one. David, Thomasus, Mayor Arcasus. Always that same distorted, wrong quality, like something that had heard humans speak, but didn't understand how. As dawn began to break, they reached a small clearing. They stopped to catch their breath, to try to figure out where they were. That's when they saw it, standing at the edge of the clearing, partially hidden by the trees. It was tall, impossibly tall, at least 8 feet, maybe more, skeletal thin, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. Its skin looked gray and tight against its bones, like something that had been starving for a very long time. And its face. Marcus would later tell investigators he couldn't really see its face clearly, just the eyes. Yellow eyes that reflected their headlamp beams like an animal's. But there was intelligence there, hunger, and something else. Recognition. It took a step toward them. Its movement was wrong, jerky and unnatural, like it was learning how to walk. David raised his rifle and fired. The shot echoed through the forest. The creature didn't fall. It didn't even seem to notice. It tilted its head, studying them, and then it opened its mouth. The sound that came out was that same terrible wail they heard before, but louder, closer, more piercing. It felt like it was inside their heads. They ran again. Thomas fell, badly spraining his ankle. Marcus and David pulled him up, supporting him between them. They half carried, half dragged him through the forest. Behind them, they could hear it following. Not running, walking. It didn't need to run. It knew they couldn't escape. They found a small cave, really just an overhang in a rocky outcrop, and squeezed inside. They huddled there as the sun rose higher. For several hours, they heard nothing. They began to hope it had given up. Thomas's ankle was swelling badly. They knew they needed help. David's phone still showed no signal. Marcus suggested that one of them try to make it out, get help, while the others stayed with Thomas. Before they could decide, they heard it, right outside the cave. That breathing again. They could smell it now too. A rotting smell, like decayed meat. Something scraped against the rock near the entrance. They pressed themselves as far back into the narrow space as they could go. They could see a shadow falling across the entrance. Something was there, right there, just outside. Minutes passed. Hours. The shadow didn't move. Whatever it was simply stood there, waiting. David whispered that they should try to make a run for it. Marcus shook his head. They were trapped. Thomas was crying silently, his injured ankle useless. And then, inexplicably, it left. They heard footsteps moving away, branches breaking in the distance. The shadow disappeared from the entrance. They waited another hour before daring to look outside. The clearing around the cave was empty, but in the snow, all around the entrance, were those massive tracks, dozens of them, circling the cave over and over. They moved as quickly as they could with Thomas between them. It took them another 6 hours to reach a trail. They followed it south and finally, reached a park access road. A ranger truck happened to be passing. They flagged it down. The ranger later said they looked like they'd seen death itself. The rescue team went back to their campsite. They found exactly what I described at the beginning: the shredded tent, the scattered supplies, and the tracks. Tracks that started human-sized near the camp, but became progressively larger and more distorted as they led away into the forest. The officials called it a bear attack, despite it being winter, despite the tracks being wrong, despite everything the three men reported. But here's what they didn't report publicly, what Marcus only told close family. On his last look back at the cave before they reached the road, he saw it one more time, standing in the distance between the trees. That impossibly tall, skeletal figure. And he swears, though he knows no one believes him, that it waved. A slow, deliberate gesture, like it was saying goodbye, or maybe see you later. Marcus Chen won't go into the woods anymore. Not in winter. Not ever. David sold all his hunting equipment. Thomas quit his job as a wilderness survival instructor. They don't talk about what happened. The official report says bear attack, exposure, hallucinations from hypothermia. But the rangers know something. They won't say it officially, but they know, because it's not the first time. Every few years, someone reports something in Algonquin in the winter. Something tall. Something that walks like a human but isn't human. Something that calls your name in the darkness. The Algonquin people, who lived in these forests for thousands of years before Europeans arrived, they had a name for it. Wendigo. The spirit of winter, starvation, and insatiable hunger. A creature that was once human but became something else. Something that hunts in the coldest months. Something that's always hungry. The forest is still there. Algonquin Provincial Park is still open. People still camp there in winter, though far fewer than in summer. And every year, a few people report strange sounds. Massive tracks. A feeling of being watched. Most of them make it out, but not everyone. This is the true account of what happened to Marcus Chen, David Chen, and Thomas Wright in January 2018. Marcus still checks his phone compulsively for signal, even in the city. David barely sleeps. And Thomas, when asked about wilderness survival, simply says that sometimes the best survival strategy is knowing when you're being hunted. And in the winter, when the temperature drops and the forest goes silent, something walks through the trees of Algonquin. Something that remembers the taste of human flesh. Something that waits.